What's up, boys and girls? I'm Mr. McRaven, and welcome to another Battlefield 4 Open Beta video. And in today's video, I wanted to share and discuss with you some of the performance figures and benchmark numbers that I managed to achieve with Battlefield 4 Open Beta. And hopefully, with me sharing these numbers with you, you can have some idea of what to expect from your hardware when Battlefield 4 is finally released later on at the end of this month, which is currently around about 2 weeks away from today. Now, before I get into the actual figures and numbers themselves, there are a couple of things I also wanted to cover, and I also want to go over the system requirements for Battlefield 4, maybe at the end of the video, some of the new exciting things to look forward to later on this month as well. But before we begin, it's worth covering and mentioning a few things. That this is an open beta, so therefore it's going to change come the time of final release and after release. So performance is going to change between now and the final release. It's worth bearing in mind that, and it's also worth bearing in mind that the video card drivers for both NVIDIA and AMD aren't final, and they will change come the final release and after that. So I can expect performance figures to only go up after the game is released itself, so I expect some driver improvements to be forthcoming in the next month or so, even after release. So those things are worth bearing in mind. It's worth also touching on the new AMD Mantle API, which is in partnership with with DICE and Battlefield 4. Hopefully we should see some good performance improvements with AMD Radeon cards there as well, but it's only speculation at the moment because I'm not entirely sure about this new Mantle system, but it is worth bearing a mention. So before we go on to the actual graphics presets that I used, the results I got, let's have a look at the first slide and we can see what is in my system, what I'm using, and where these performance numbers come from. And we can see from the specs I'm using an Intel Core i7-4770K at stock clocks. There's no overclocks on the CPU, and I'm using a Gigabyte UD3HZ87 motherboard with a Kingston Beast 2133 MHz memory kit, and I'm also using an Asus Matrix Platinum HD 7970 graphics card, and that's stock clocked at factory overclock of 1100 MHz on there, but no further overclock has been made to the GPU. Now the Battlefield 4 Open Beta is installed on a OTZ Agility 4 SSD, 256GB SSD, and those are basically the system specs used. There's not been any messing around with any files or any optimization made. It's been installed. They've got the latest graphics drivers, the non-beta version, and that's how the system's all set out there. So we're going to take a look at the first slide for the Ultra preset within the graphics options, and I'm running a 1920 by 1200p monitor, so these are the results for that. So with the Ultra preset in front of you, you can see that we've got a minimum of 35, maximum of 50 frames per second, and an average of 43. Now on the Ultra preset, obviously it's going to be the hardest it can be on any system, and with a minimum of 35, some would say that's unplayable, but to me that's just about playable at 35, and it wasn't of course at 35 at all times, but it's a reasonable minimum frame rate to expect there. But the average of 43 is still very playable indeed. There were of course dips here and there with intense situations, but other than that at Ultra it was still very playable and certainly came across very smooth even for me. Now, if I were to overclock my system a bit more, those numbers would certainly get pushed up a bit better. But I also expect in the future, with driver improvements and things like that, those performance numbers will actually increase anyway, so we'll have to retest this at a later stage. So moving on to the next slide, we can see when the preset is set to high that the minimum actually jumps up to 40 FPS and maximum to 92, and it averages around about 55 FPS, which to me is quite a healthy FPS, and it's certainly a very smooth and playable game. Now you could of course set yourself a nice custom preset between Ultra and High, and you'll still have respectable FPS and a very smooth gameplay experience, no doubt. But like I said, with all the other improvements that are to come after final release with drivers and such, I expect those numbers to increase also as well. Now, the last preset which I actually tried was the medium preset, which is the numbers you're going to see in front of you now. And I got a minimum of 62 FPS, a maximum of 102, but the average of 76 FPS. And that is nothing to be sniffed at. That's certainly a nice, healthy FPS to have. Now, all these measurements were taken using fraps. So some of that you've got to take with a pinch of salt and maybe add a couple of frames per second on each of those, as fraps does tend to take some performance away when it's being used. However, with an average of 76 FPS, the medium settings seem to be very, very smooth. So anywhere between medium, high and ultra. If you make a nice custom mix within the graphic settings, you can get a nice smooth gameplay experience. But I actually had no issues setting it to ultra, high or medium at any point. So those are the numbers, those are the facts and figures that I got from my own system. And maybe if you look on your own system, you can kind of compare what kind of numbers you're going to get and what to expect. But I do say, do bear in mind the kind of performance this kind of performance is going to change, subject to video card drivers, Mantle, and any game fixes or patches that are to come after final release. So it's worth bearing in mind. But overall, my experience playing the Battlefield 4 Open Beta was a very smooth one. I never saw any of the major FPS drops that some people did experience. My gameplay was always very smooth most of the times, even during the most intense moments like the collapsing of the buildings or things exploding. Even then, most of the time, it was a very smooth experience for myself. If you didn't have a smooth experience and you experienced problems, feel free to leave a comment down below and let other people know how you experienced the beta yourself. Now, covering at the end of this section of the video, going over the system requirements. Now, you could look at the minimum system requirements. I have, and personally I doubt very highly that any system running the minimum is going to have much of a fun time with that. So I would take the minimum PC specs for Battlefield 4 with a pinch of salt, to be honest. The recommended system specifications for the game are a quad-core CPU, which is a Core i5 or an i7 CPU, or a Bulldozer stroke PAR driver AMD CPU. Anything that's 3 GHz and above, you should be good to go. It's recommended to have 4 gigs of memory, or at least 8 gigs if you're using a 64-bit operating system. You do require a modern DirectX 11 graphics card with at least 2 gigs of VRAM. Most people will be running something similar to that anyway, but that's equivalent to, say, a GeForce 600 series or a Radeon 7000 series from 7850 upwards, or let's say a 660 from NVIDIA should be good to go. Playing the game. And as far as operating system go, it's kind of a mixed bag. Some people are saying Windows 8 is the best operating system to use, and some people are saying, well, Windows 7 is fine. Personally, I've been using Windows 7 64-bit Pro. I've had no issues at all. However, there are some benefits to having Windows 8, such as the DirectX support for the latest version of DirectX. Other than that, I can't tell you any experience for Windows 8 because I don't have it. I can only go by the Windows 7 that I've been currently using. You will require at least 30 plus gigabytes of hard drive space for the game. Probably a bit more than that when you include all the map packs and other things that are yet to be released as well. So the system requirements are quite high for this game, I would say. Personally, I think you're going to need a reasonably good system, and especially a reasonably good CPU and graphics in order to play this game smoothly with any kind of high settings. My system isn't high end, it's probably around about the middle of the road, and I had no problems playing it on whatever setting I choose though. But some of you out there are going to be running systems with slightly lesser GPUs or slightly lesser CPUs, and that's not a problem. You can probably still have quite a good smooth gameplay experience. But I'm not going to go into the depths and get into an argument about whether a system's good or not to play the game. I'm just roughly touching on some of the specs and hardware you're going to need to play it. And some of the other things to look forward to between now and the time the game releases, some of the new graphics cards that AMD are going to be releasing. They've already, at the current time here in the UK, they've actually already released some of the graphics cards, the 270X, the 280X. I think some of the lower end 260 versions as well have also come out. Some of them are pre-order, some of them are actually available. For those of you that are looking at these new graphics cards, the 270X and 280X, these are actually rebrands. They're not actually really new GPUs, so to speak. They are, in fact, rebrands of the older versions. So the 270X is equivalent to a HD 7870, thereabouts. maybe a touch above that, probably closer to the 7950 in performance terms. The 280X is the 7970's replacement. So the difference in performance between a 280X and a 7970 is very minimal. There's not really much difference between it. But if you want the new shiny number of the R9 280X, then by all means you can get yourself one of those. But expect 7970 gigahertz performance from one of those cards. But the ones that we're really looking forward to between now and the end of the month are the R9 290 and the 290X from AMD. But we're not allowed to say too much about them at the moment because the NDA hasn't been lifted. Hopefully it should be lifted in the next couple of days. But what I can say is you're going to expect some really good performance figures from both the 290 and the 290X. These two cards that are coming from AMD are beastly. They are absolutely beastly, and they're going to certainly stir up competition with NVIDIA's equivalent cards, that's for sure. Hopefully in a couple of days you guys can go have some reviews on the 290 and the 290X. I'm certainly looking forward to some of those reviews myself. But if you're going to be running one of those, you're going to have no problems with whatever FPS you're expecting to run into. I'm going to say that much. Yes, so we have those cards to look forward to. We also have Mantle to look forward to. Not only if you're not even if you're looking to upgrade, if you're currently using the 7970 or the new R9 R7 series cards, then Mantle's going to improve your performance across the board with all of them as well, because it still applies to the current generation of cards. But I've been Mr. McRaven, and hopefully some of these numbers and some things I've been discussing have been helpful. If they have, then great. If not, well, we haven't really lost anything. Feel free to share your thoughts and opinions in the comments box below. I will, of course, as always, try to answer comments as and when I can. Until then, I will be looking to make a new Battlefield 4 series on my channel as and when the game is released, so you can always come back and check that out. There is another current video on my channel, Battlefield 4. It's about a dog tag glitch. You might find that amusing, so you might want to go and check that out. But until the next time, guys and girls, you guys take care and have fun.